So welcome everybody. We'll get started in just a moment. We have the famous, I think you're somewhat famous, Gary, getting famous for Climate to Thrive.
I don't know, Jonathan.
When I mention that in climate circles around the state, they know what I'm talking about.
Good, that's what we like to hear. Yeah, we're making waves.
So for those that are just joining us, can everybody turn on their videos for a moment, at least start with them on? If you've never experienced speaking to a blank screen, it's really, really disconcerting. As a professor, I taught most of the year last year in person, but I sometimes do distance, and it's really, really hard when you can't see people's faces. You know, you can't get that feedback. As imperfect as Zoom is, it still helps.
I understand that you're all government interns, but what is that? I mean, can you just say a little bit more about the focus of this class?
Okay, so with the Margaret Chase Smith Center, Peggy McKee, who can't be here today, and so she asked me to cover for her. I'm actually her boss, and so that's boss's job is always to fill in when nobody else can make it. That's me. But also Gary's a long-term colleague, and I wanted to be here personally because Gary and I have done work together. But the government internship program, we place this year was fewer, but I think it was 30 to 40 students in state government, state agencies, local government, towns. Most of them are in state offices, but we also have some in towns and municipal offices. And it's a 10-week paid internship program where they get to understand a little bit more about how government runs. And we've been doing this lunchtime meetings with people from different levels of government, you know, state government. Last week we had Christina Egan, who runs the Greater Portland Council of Governments, which is about 20 municipal governments. And we thought it'd be really appropriate, and we're very privileged to have Gary Friedmann here. Gary, I'll let you introduce yourself, but the reason we wanted Gary was because he runs Climate to Thrive. It's a local organization and it's having a huge impact. And I'll let Gary take it away. And maybe you can have the students say where they're from so you have a sense of their interests and stuff. But yeah. Gary, why don't you introduce yourself?
Okay, great. Thanks, Jonathan. Well, I'm great to be with you this afternoon. I have been on the Bar Harbor Town Council this is my 10th year. And in 2015, my wife and I were talking about what we could do about climate change, which we felt was really the biggest issue facing not only our community, but our state and the world. And I've been working since I was elected to the town council on trying to get the town to solarize its facilities. And it came to a head in a town meeting in June 2015 when I brought a proposal to put solar panels on our public works building and on the roof of our pole shed which stores public works equipment, which would allow us to build the first power purchase agreement solar array for a municipality in Amera territory, now Versant in Eastern Maine, and also the first community solar farm open to residents and businesses in Bar Harbor in Eastern Maine as well. And it was controversial back in 2015, using town property for a solar farm, leasing. It had to go to town meeting because if you lease for a period of more than 15 years or sell any town property, you have to get town meeting approval, and power purchase agreements, actually you're leasing your roof to a third party which builds and owns the array until such time as you might choose to buy it out. So my wife and I did our phone calling of all our friends and neighbors who we thought might be interested, and we had a huge turnout at town meeting, and 250 people, which is a lot for Bar Harbor, and it passed handily. But following that, we were saying, what could we do about really to tackle this issue more broadly? So we did what a lot of Mainers do. We called a bunch of friends for a potluck supper at our home talk about climate change and our feelings about it and thoughts about what we could do. And that was the beginning of the MDI Climate Solutions Potluck Group. And every month, everyone invited a few more people until in a few months we had more people that would fit in our whole house. And we decided to take it to the community with an event which we called A Climate to Thrive. And that was on a cold winter day in January 2016. We rented the neighborhood house in Northeast Harbor, and we brought a speaker from New Hampshire who had worked in his town to do energy conservation and install solar technology. And we had different breakout groups where we talked about all the different activities that we felt would be required to make Mount Desert Island energy independent by the year 2030, which is 15 years away. And that was the topic, the focus of this gathering was making MDI energy independent in 15 years. And we wanted to give it a name that indicated that it was about climate, but that turned it on its head, because climate is so overwhelming and discouraging if you really think about it. But by calling it A Climate to Thrive, we were indicating that by taking the steps necessary to make our island energy independent, we'd actually strengthen our local economy, strengthen our social bonds, build community, and probably save money in the process. So we weren't sure what to expect, but we did offer free food and music, and we had over 200 people show up, and that was the launch of our group. And since then, we've continued to work in those areas, which are transportation, alternative energy, energy conservation, local foods, zero waste, and public policy. 6 different areas, and we're still doing work in most of those realms. We now have 2 full-time and 2 part-time employees for Climate to Thrive. We've raised $1 million in the last 5 years to fund installation of electric vehicle charging stations throughout MDI and Eastern Maine, actually all the way to Bangor, anywhere that's off the I-95 corridor, which the state isn't focused on. We've facilitated the largest school array at the time on MDI High School to completely power that high school with solar panels, and we're just taking delivery of the first electric school bus in the state that's going to run off the sun there. We turned the Tremont landfill into a solar array to power that community's municipal and school operations. And we did a Solarize MDI project, which offered discounts to people who wanted to sign up to get solar panels on their roofs of their homes or businesses in a period in 2017. And we have other big solar projects going on. Under development, MDI Hospital is going to be the first in the state to be completely powered by the sun, not just the hospital facility, but all of its health centers, of which there's about 6 throughout MDI and in Trenton. We have a zero waste group that meets monthly that's looking at how to increase recycling and composting on the island. We've connected people with local foods by supporting a farm drop, an indoor farmers market throughout the year. I could go on, but we do have about 1,500 people on our mailing list. And then I guess I will say one other thing is that about 3 years into this project, we realized that that there was no way that we could possibly get anywhere close to energy independence if we didn't see changes in state regulatory and legislative policies. So one of our initiatives was to develop a visionary energy policy initiative, which brought leaders involved in energy and environment together from around the state, and that turned into Maine Climate Action Now, which is a coalition of about a dozen different groups that seeks to elevate and empower youth voices in climate action. And we've done several actions in Augusta at the State House and with the Maine Climate Council to try to influence policy that way. We were part of the successful solar revolution that happened at the legislature in 2019, which took Maine from being one of the worst states in the nation to consider solar to one of the best. There are a lot of issues with that are still being resolved, but that was really quite a turnaround for us. And just this year, young people, high school, actually middle school, high school, and college age, worked with legislators to introduce LD 99, which makes Maine the first state in the nation to divest its pension funds from fossil fuels. And we're talking about over $1 billion invested in fossil fuels for Maine state employees who rely on that pension fund. And that's not only going to be good for the environment, but you're going to see a better return on investment by doing that. So I have been involved with state policy that way. Also, Climate to Thrive is monitoring the Public Utilities Commission proceedings with Versant Power now, trying to encourage them to do more to meet Maine's climate goals and interconnect solar projects, which is a big bottleneck in Maine. So maybe it would be good to just do kind of Q&A now. That's kind of a little bit about me and a Climate to Thrive, and I'm sure you have thoughts about this too.
Well, Gary, first of all, I hope you go to bed feeling good at night, because you realize Gary's not being paid for this. I don't think, right? Or you're if anything, it's a nominal. Is this totally volunteer?
No, it's worse than being a town councilor. I get $1,500 a year serving on the town council. I don't get any. I make contributions to fund the Climate to Thrive.
So it's really, I'm sure, look, I know that you give a lot of your personal time for this. It's a local government initiative. I work at the state and federal level on climate issues. You and I have talked before. And let me say especially to the young folks who I'm going to open this up and let you guys say what your interests are and ask you questions. But it takes all levels of government, right? You need federal guidance, you need state policy, and you need local. Without the local governments and people behind this, the state and federal leaders will not be there. And I promise that is absolutely true. If you don't feel that, I really, really believe it. So I think it's all of us. And for this government internship program, Gary is a perfect example of somebody who stepped up and said local government can make a difference. And I'll stop with that. So why don't you guys from how about how about north to south? Guess where you are in the spectrum, north to south in Maine, or wherever you are, north to south where you physically are right now. Why don't you go start north, the most northern person, introduce yourself and why you're, and maybe a question. Come on, don't be shy.
I'm not sure if I'm the most northern. I'm in Bangor.
Could be.
All right, well, I'll go first then. I think what I'm most interested in right now is just understanding what kind of skill sets or like variety of people are required to have or what part of the team requires certain skill sets. So like if someone's better at communication, what does that look like? If someone's better at the technical end, what does that look like? And how do they fit together?
Yeah, that's a great question. We've after about 3 years, we thought we'd draw up the like a toolkit so that other communities could form their own, climate action organizations. And I would say it was only very modestly successful. I think what's important is to have several things. I'd say you have to be good at networking. I mean, like this, I think organizations like Climate to Thrive are essentially, collaborative, and networking and outreach, all about outreach and education, bringing community together. So, you want to try to bring in as many people from different sectors who are interested in this issue. So I think one of the things that my wife and I did right was when we started the potluck group, we got like young people and retirees and people from, just different backgrounds that, just had different takes on this thing. And I think you really want to bring in as many different skill sets as you can. I think that another critical piece is, I guess, I just say kind of organizational or facilitation kind of skills. Like professionally, I've been in nonprofit development for 30 years. So I have a firm, Gary Friedmann and Associates, that's been helping nonprofit organizations throughout Maine and actually the Northeast with development, with capital campaigns, with business planning, feasibility studies, organizational development. So I knew a lot about how to work with people, and you have to have a certain amount of people skills to hold everyone together, because not everyone agrees on how to get things done. And one of the things that we were able to do is put together a board of runs from about 12 to 14 people that draws from all of our island towns, and and helps direct our organization. I think that's been really important. I guess the third thing is it really helps if you know how to raise money, because I think a Climate to Thrive could not have achieved what it has without paid staff. We started out after the launch, we realized we needed people just to power this thing. So we got some startup funding from Maine Community Foundation, the Broadreach Fund, New England Grassroots Fund, Natural Resources Council of Maine. A lot of small grants, $500 to $25,000, and we started out with a couple of part-timers, and that eventually grew, I guess 2 years ago, into one full-timer and a part-timer. Now we have 2 full-timers, and we're just able to get so much more done by having people that are going to keep the website going and support our committees and make sure that there's follow through on the projects. Volunteers are great for a lot of things, but you can't rely on them to get things done, especially complicated projects. Like if you're trying to help the MDI high school figure out how to build a 500 kilowatt array, and how do they do it without investing any money up front, and getting the best ultimate deal. And so we had a paid person whose job was to understand how power purchase agreements work, and support the school board and the school administration through this whole process. So a Climate to Thrive is really, we're facilitators and cheerleaders and promoters, and we try to build a collaborative network among municipal governments. 3 of our towns either have declared climate emergencies or have a sustainability task force. So we support them, and then work with any organizations that we can. I mean, another big success story was that at one of our community gatherings, a few business people said, we'd like to do something to encourage other businesses to develop sustainable business practices. And on MDI, that's hospitality, so restaurants and hotels. And they themselves organized this, or conceived of an organization which is called Sustainable MDI. And if you go to Bar Harbor or any of the towns, you might see these little, stickers in the doors, and to get the sustainability certification, they decided that a business would have to adopt so many of like a dozen different sustainable practices that were outlined, and we would provide technical support. And we basically just staffed this group of businesses that really understood how sustainable tourism is critical, to our future. So, I think that that's another key, is like anytime you have a volunteer or a small group of people that have a good idea that's related to your mission, like figure out how to support them and make that happen. We do that regularly.
Next person, next most northern or even further north if we missed you.
I'm not super northern. I'm actually from Southwest, but I do have two questions. I'm from Cornish, if anybody knows where that is. But my first question is, I was hoping you could talk a little bit more about the zero waste initiatives that your group does. And then secondly, I was hoping you could talk about some of the challenges. I think, especially it sounds to me like solar expansion may have had some challenges. Were they mostly like at individual level, like community level, or industry?
Yeah, those are great questions, Kathleen. The zero waste group on MDI, I would say has taken on one of the most challenging issues, because we've been dealing with the whole fiberite debacle, and it could, that could turn out to be like the greatest municipal solid waste solution ever, or it could turn out to be a total bust that's cost the towns tens of millions, and left us with like just incinerating or burying our trash. So, so the group, and what happened, the reason it's challenging is that Fiberite has this idea that it's like all in one bin, like they're going to sort it all and they're going to use everything and increase the recycling rate over what it is now. And that's extremely attractive to public works directors, because like, who wants to deal with baling cardboard and, crushing glass, So, so that took all the incentive for even, like one of their big products was going to be methane, from anaerobic digestion of food waste and, organic. So, like composting is, in my view, my wife's an organic farmer, and, we believe that, the highest and best use of food waste is to compost it and lock the carbon back in the soils and build, soils that way. But so this group has been, they've been providing a lot of education and support for local activists, and they're still working on the possibility of a compost system. The municipalities have contracted with Fiberite to give them all of our compostables, but a private group could conceivably compost, and the sustainable MDI businesses are already sending a lot of their compostables up to the Exeter plant. So there is an interest in composting, but getting it to happen is a challenge. I think the biggest success of the zero waste group was that an 8th grade teacher in Southwest Harbor 3 years ago, like every year she does these community kind of problem solving projects with her students. And they decided that plastic in the oceans was the biggest problem. It's a fishing town, right? And there's microplastics everywhere in Frenchman Bay. And then they were noticing plastic bags, in the trees and, in the sides of the roads. And we're concerned about, styrofoam, which never, washes up on the beaches in little beads. And so she coached them, and they went to town meeting in Southwest Harbor and got the town to agree to ban non-reusable plastic bags and styrofoam in Southwest Harbor. And so these are like 4 8th grade girls. You know, the Zero Waste Committee was like, wow, these girls are amazing. You know, they took them on the road to all the other towns. First, they did informational sessions at the libraries, and then they went to the town council, the boards of selectmen. And when they came into the council chambers in Bar Harbor, that we were the 4th town, and it was profound. They gave a PowerPoint presentation where it was just pictures, and they talked without scripts about the situation and, you know, what the solution would be. And at the end of that, and each one of them had their part, you know, and no adults. The adults were there to provide transportation to the meeting, you know, and at the end of it, you know, the council's like looking at it, it's like, you know, you can't say no to 4 fierce, you know, 13-year-old women. You know, I mean, you just like, you know, we didn't have a chance. And that was the inspiration for me to form Maine Climate Action Now, to elevate and amplify youth voices in climate, because I realized that young people were like, they not only got it because this is their future, right? But they were like, people listen, you know. And so when we organized our first action at the State House in April 2019, you know, you take like 350 kids and, like, you know, put them in the State House. It's like they had never seen anything like this. You know, they're always confronted with lobbyists, but, you know, you don't see kids who are like anywhere from 12 to, you know, 25 speaking articulately and forcefully about specific legislation, and then testifying. And you know, and you know, between one-on-one meetings and testimony, that was, according to our state representative Brian Hubble at the time, he felt like that was one of the turning points in the success of that session. And I think young people continue to lead the way, and that's why Climate to Thrive does an internship program every year for high school students, and continues to support Young Action. Your other question is, what are the challenges? What are the biggest challenges we've had? I mean, I guess, so I chair the Energy Committee, so I could talk a lot about, you know, solar and you know, utilities. I guess, but I think I want to talk on 2 levels, and they're very related. One is, in the big picture, like, it's just so frustrating that people aren't taking dramatic actions now. You know, when we formed a Climate to Thrive in 2016, people said we were nuts to think that we could be energy independent in 15 years. And we weren't even sure, you know, how it could be done. We just knew that it had to be done, you know, because that's what the science said, is that we've got to get our emissions down dramatically to keep, you know, the climate from warming more than 2 degrees. And if we didn't do that, we'd have runaway climate change. That's still true, you know, that hasn't changed. But what has changed is that the technology's there and the economics are there. So that we have a $6 million grant proposal into the US Department of Energy for a microgrid demonstration project on MDI, which could begin to lay it would pilot to show how we could actually regulate, you know, both demand and supply, and through storage, energy storage, and creative use of electric vehicles and heat pumps, and, you know, all this stuff, plus solar, you know, dramatic solarizing of the community. We could actually, I mean, technologically and financially, it's feasible to be energy independent. In the summertime, you know, it's like there's a lot of leakage with tourists and stuff, so that, you know, it's a challenge, but it's not impossible. But, you know, so given that we know that, why aren't we getting more aggressive leadership in Augusta? You know, the governor's like, she's formed the Climate Council, but now that she's facing Paula Page in 22, you know, she's kind of dialing it back quite a bit, you know, and this is not the time for the faint-hearted. You know, this is kind of make or break it time in Maine and across the nation. So you know, personally, I'm frustrated that we can't like that people just haven't woken up. Like, what's it going to take? You know, does Maine need to have like 10 million acres on fire for us to decide to, you know, to really do things more dramatically? Do we need to have, like, does the Penobscot and the Kennebec and the Androscoggin need to flood out, you know, Bangor and Saco and Augusta and, you know, all, you know, Bath Iron Works? Like, do they all need to be underwater before we decide that we actually need to do something now? You know, and so that's why I like working with young people, is because like they get it and they demand this, and they're frustrated. So that's my big frustration. And then I'll just channel that into talking about our electric grid, because the only way that we're going to decarbonize Maine's economy is to electrify heating and transportation, and then to power all of our economy through renewables. We have enough wind potential in the Gulf to power all of Maine, including heat pumps in every building and electric vehicles in every home and every business for every purpose, and including industry. There's just in the Gulf of Maine, you know, but you know, so the fishermen are, you know, screaming, and it's going to, you know, LePage, you know, lost us about 8 years on that, but you know, we could still, there's still incredible solar potential. Like, we know what, on MDI, we know how many acres of solar panels we need to power the whole island right now, 24/7, and it's 220 acres at current needs. You know, now if you electrify everything, it's going to have to go up, but if you have a microgrid with more energy conservation and modulating demand, you know, it's not a, you know, on an island with 65,000 acres, you know, you can't tell me that we don't have 225 acres that we could put into solar panels. And you know, we know that this has to be done. And at the same time, Maine has the least reliable and least well-maintained electric grid in the nation. You know, some of you must be in CMP territory, and you know how bad they are. They're pathologically liars and cheats, and their owners, and, you know, Avangrid, you know, the CEO of that holding company is you know, is suspected of criminal activity, and they just see Maine as a cash cow that they're going to milk, and they don't put any money into maintaining or hardening the grid, and that's why they have such frequent and long-term power outages. And then when it comes to interconnecting, there's this term, interconnection is when you build a solar array, and whether it's, you know, a few panels on your roof or you know, 20,000 panels in a field somewhere, you've got to get that interconnected into the grid in a way that's safe and that works with the capacity of the lines there. And so CMP in particular has been dragging its feet on interconnection because that's not how they make money. You know, their biggest return is to build a power line from Hydro-Quebec through Maine to Massachusetts. And it's a guaranteed, you know, $150 million a year profit. You know, they get a guaranteed, you know, federal law requires that, you know, capital investments and utilities have a guaranteed rate of return of around 9 or 10% annually. And so that's why they're spending $40 million on, you know, promoting that line, is because it's, you know, that's what makes them money. Why didn't they put that money into allowing for more solar panels to come onto the grid? Because they're not incentivized to do that by the PUC or by their shareholders. And Versant's, you know, they're new to Maine. We've been working with them since, you know, they were, before they acquired Emera. We'd like to hope that they would be better, and they're talking a good game, but we haven't seen any evidence of that. And, you know, without going into a lot of the technicalities of what our challenges are for interconnecting our solar projects, I'll just say that that the 2019 legislation encouraged literally hundreds of projects in Maine of up to 5 megawatts to be built across the state, and very few of them have been built and interconnected. And it's because of the the way the utilities have captured the PUC over the 100 years of this model, of this outdated model that we have for, centralized power plants generating electricity, transmitting it to local areas, and then distributing it. That's the dinosaur model. And the model that's going to change Maine's future is you have decentralized energy generation on rooftops, in fields all throughout, and you're with artificial intelligence, you're figuring out how to make the best use of that energy when it's being generated, and how to store it, and then get it to the right places at the right time. So that's my big frustration, and I don't think there's going to be any significant change until we buy them out with a consumer-owned utility, which I'm on the board of Our Power, which has that objective.
So Gary, there is a lot there. I'm not even going to begin to try to unpack that. So you're assuming a lot of knowledge here, Gary, and these are smart young folks, and they're working in state government. But I'll just tell you, understanding rate of return regulation, connectivity, legal requirements, there is a lot there. So I think people are, rather than push through that question, I think they're going to follow up with you later, because there was like 2 hours worth of material there if you had to explain all those terms, because it's really complicated. That's why I'm glad we're doing this day. This is a conversation that's hard to have in the public newspaper, because it is it is technical and complicated. It's not quite as simple. But okay, next, more than personal, introduce yourself. Maybe say which agency or town you work for, just to give Gary something to go on. Next, and you can be. We're weighted to the south. I know where you are from, so I know that we have a southern weight. That's why I started in the north. So don't worry about being too far south. Go ahead.
Hi, so I'm in the town of Gray, working in the community development department. On the subject of technical questions, you mentioned that you were sort of in the business of encouraging developers to get like LEED certification for buildings. And I was wondering if that was sort of like an informal encouragement mechanism, or whether any of the 4 towns on MDI had in their ordinances something that like developers needed to obtain LEED certification or anything like that.
Yeah, that's a great question, Drew.
Why don't you start off with what LEED certification is, Gary?
Well, LEED certification is, I'm actually not working on LEED certification. That's kind of an architectural standard for buildings, where there are different levels. There's like, what is it, like bronze, gold, and platinum or something. But depending on how you source the materials, like you'd get extra points for using wood products from Maine rather than importing steel beams from outside. If it was super insulated, so it had a very small energy footprint, you'd get points for that. So that's primarily for new construction, I believe, isn't it, Drew? Yeah. So what we're working on here is mapping, inventorying greenhouse gas emissions and figuring out how to reduce those. So like say with the town of Bar Harbor, one of the things that the young people did after they initiated the plastic bag ban is to go back to the council and say, we want you to declare a climate emergency. And that was a big step up. And so our climate emergency task force, which was formed about 1.5 years ago now, has done an inventory of greenhouse gas emissions from every town operation. Public works, not only the building, but the vehicles, like the whole thing. And they show the greenhouse gases from every aspect of the operation. And that was just presented at last week's council meeting. And the next step is going to be to make recommendations on how to start, plugging those greenhouse gas leaks. And they're going to start with the lowest hanging fruit, I believe, where there's really high rates of return for the investment. And, you know, sometimes the best investment, we've already done, like we converted all of our streetlights to LEDs. That one like was phenomenal because the savings started coming in a year. You know, we financed it so that, you know, we're saving a ton of money that way. The state is supporting acquisition of electric vehicles, which we've our assessor and our code enforcement officer are using EVs now, which you know are much cheaper to operate and to maintain. So that, you know, that's plugging some greenhouse gas emissions. But we I think that the next steps are going to be to do you know, closer looks at every building, every operation, and see where can we get the investment with the quickest rate of return, because that's what, you know, council and town meetings going to want to know is, okay, if we're going to spend this money, you know, show us why we should do that.
Great, thank you, Gary. And I'm sorry to put you on the spot about leads. I just can't assume everybody here knows all these terms. I mean, it is, you're absolutely right. It's a technical, it's a certification for buildings. University of Maine's Rec Center, if anybody ever comes up to UMaine, I know some of you are UMaine students, but we have a silver, our rec building is silver certified, locally sourced materials, highly efficient HVAC systems, things like that. And it does save a lot of energy. The upfront costs generally are paid back more than paid back over the lifetime of the building. So stuff like that is often common sense, but it does take, as I think Drew was pointing out, it does often take a nudge, a regulatory nudge to get to make people sort of look a little harder at the numbers. So who's next on the northern or western? We'll get, or should we just go all the way south? Should we meet in the middle, or do you want to go? Who wants to go next? Don't be shy. I know you're not shy. If you were playing some video game or something, you'd be killing somebody on something. So don't be shy.
This might be a little bit off topic, but I have a question about your background with nonprofit organizations. And I was just wondering, do you think it's worth it for young people to join an already established nonprofit? Or do you think it's better for them to try to create their own and get their name out there?
I think it's always better to start like volunteering with some organization. You know, when I was in college, I joined the, you know, Environmental Action Committee, and I've, you know, I've been involved in various environmental organizations ever since. But I think what that does is it gives you a sense of how they work. And so, like, before you go and start your own, it's good to have some experience in that field. And I think that you know, that my own experience, you know, working with nonprofit organizations professionally and as a volunteer was really critical to making A Climate to Thrive a success. One thing that I found, you know, encouraging young people to be involved is that we build a lot of hope through action. You know, when you're feeling kind of hopeless about things, and then you realize how powerful you are by, you know, either going to the town council to get a plastic bag ban, or going to the school board to urge them to put solar panels on the school. You know, that builds a lot of hope in seeing the change and being the change.
Gary, thank you. Some days when I feel depressed, I should remember, or discouraged, I should remember those words. When you do something, you always feel better about it. And so that's actually great. That's good for me too. I'm not a young person, but that's a great reminder. Someone next, come on. We only have 10 minutes left. I want to give you guys, I want to end 5 minutes early before the hour so you can get back and do your state jobs or your municipal jobs. So don't, someone jump up.
I'd love to go next. I'm in Union working for the town. I don't think that's the further south here, but I would love for you to talk about some of the problems or opportunities that you had specific to the island. I see a lot of other communities with solar fields or solar farms popping up. And I'm just curious to know, what are the advantages or disadvantages you had trying to implement this on, you know, MDI, such a a tourist heavy area for half the year and such a desolate place at times in the wintertime?
Yeah, that's a great question, Michael. The biggest problem solarizing MDI is our land values are so high. You know, we're coastal and half the island's in national park, and we have a lot of conservation easements on the remaining land. And you know, it's important that we not turn our agricultural lands into solar farms. You know, I mean, that wouldn't be the best use for the very limited high value agricultural soils we have. And you know, we don't want, you know, solar farms to be, you know, to be eyesores, because people, you know, they climb the mountains, and you probably don't want to be looking at solar farms everywhere. So, so the first thing we did was we got a College of the Atlantic student to do this program that analyzed the potential of every rooftop on MDI using GIS and you know, some mathematical calculations. And he determined that if every roof that had access to the sun, and now they don't even have to be south facing, they can be east or west facing, because the price of solar panels has come down so far that it's still economically viable to put it on like anything except a north facing roof. But he determined through that program that if every rooftop on MDI that had solar access put solar panels on, that at peak demand, which is also at you know, when the sun's shining the brightest, that we would supply 80% of the island's total electrical consumption when the sun's shining. So that's a big if, you know, a big caveat, because the sun's obviously not shining most of the time like that. So, but that was a game changer for us, because we realized that we had this incredible potential just on our rooftops. And so that's when we went full bore with the Solarize MDI project to try to get people to do those. We got 76 installations in 2017. We're going to up that now, and with some improvements. But I think the other thing is that, so we had to look at what are the best places for ground mounted panels. And we started with the landfills and the transfer stations, you know, like take land that's already a brownfield, you know, that's been compromised some way, and use that first. And if you only need, so we only need another 225 acres beyond every rooftop to power MDI 24/7. That would be assuming that you could store that energy when the sun's not shining, right? So that's where the microgrid comes in. But so, you know, we're the town of Bar Harbor has an old gravel pit that we're looking at building an array on. Town of Southwest Harbor, we're putting it's called the Long Pond Community Solar Farm is being built right now at their transfer station. The Tremont landfill has solar panels going on it. That's still not going to be that's not going to add up to 225 acres, but that's our biggest challenge. So then we went over to the Hancock County Commissioners who run the Hancock County Airport. It's name is called the Bar Harbor Airport. It's just over the bridge in Trenton, and it's there's a substation right there that just before the lines come across the bridge to MDI, and turns out the airport has about 30 acres of land that would be allowed by the FAA, and it's not wetlands, and it meets all the setbacks and everything else. So that's enough for like probably 5 to 10 megawatts of power, which is it's substantial. MDI's peak consumption is 20 megawatts. So we're thinking that so we're rethinking what energy independence means. Is it okay to have the power coming from off the island if it's going straight to the power lines and and across the bridge, or like so but that's, I think that's a problem that as soon as you cross the bridge, the land values drop by like 30%. So it's a lot more viable to build solar arrays off island.
I won't turn you in for cheating, Gary. That's okay. Okay, we have time for like one or two more questions, brief ones. Come on, step up.
I could always shoot another question if nobody else has
Oh,
one.
I see Caroline.
Oh,
Looks like Caroline had her hand up.
That's all right. You can go first, Kathleen. Or Katie, sorry.
I was just wondering if you could speak more a little bit about like electronic vehicles and how that's like working into the microgrid, and like charging cars and charging cars in association, with the grid.
Well, yeah, I mean, battery storage technology has improved so much, and the car companies are beginning to catch up. I have to say that one of the most exciting things to me is the Ford F-150 Lightning, which, the F-150 pickup truck is the biggest selling automobile of all time, period. And it's Ford's biggest moneymaker. So for them to think about electrifying that truck is really an incredible step forward. And its biggest sales are in rural America, which is most of Maine, right? And so they've done some things with it that are just brilliant, that illustrate how the technology is advanced. So one of the things about how you power an economy based on renewables is everyone always says, well, yeah, that's great, except what about when the sun's not shining? Or when the wind's not blowing, right? Well, so the answer to some people is putting up a Tesla Powerwall. You can put batteries in your home, and instead of buying a gasoline generator when the power goes out, which it does all the time up here, right? You can power this wall, which stores about as much as a generator could provide for your home for maybe a couple of days. And but the battery in a F-150 Lightning is enough to power that truck, depending on the model, 200 to 300 miles, which is like probably 4 to 5 Tesla Powerwalls. So the thing that they're doing, which feeds right into what we're trying to do with our microgrid, and using artificial intelligence, but with this truck, for Maine, don't buy a generator, buy an F-150, because it comes with a power station, where you plug it in, that goes both ways. So charge your truck up at night, and if we get a big storm and the power goes out, just run it backwards into the home, and it could power your home depending on how much electricity you use, and if you're able to, be thoughtful about it, for anywhere from like 3 to 6 days, if you have the long range F-150. Not only that, how on construction sites, you see guys operating compressors to run their pneumatic nail guns and stuff like that. The F-150 Lightning has 120 and 240 volt, receptacles on it. You like pop the hood and you plug in your power tools right into that truck. So it just shows how it's an example of how the whole economy could be electrified, and how we could use, vehicles sit idle 80–90% of the time, right? It's an asset that's doing nothing for you when it's sitting there. Well, that F-150 now is your backup generator. It's when the power goes out. And it also, ideally, if you had a smart grid, and this is what we're talking about with our microgrid demonstration that we've asked the DOE to fund, what you do is you have like artificial intelligence that's deciding when to charge that F-150 and when to pull the power back. So like one of the big problems with solar is I mean, just from a grid point of view, just think about this. If you're an electrical engineer and the sun's shining and then it's like some clouds go overhead, and those clouds like cause the solar production to just temporarily plummet, so like that's one of the big engineering challenges with solar. Well, if you're able to decide, with your little, microchip, in your home that, stop charging the F-150 right now. Actually, we're going to draw from the F-150 to stabilize the grid. That's the smart grid of the future. that our utilities should be working with us on now. They should be working with us to put EV charging stations all over the place and using smart grid technology to prepare us for a carbon-free future. And they're not doing it because they can't figure out, they're just stuck in a dinosaur model of thinking.
Well,
They're fossils themselves.
so Gary, look, I want to end now, and I'm sorry, not because I just want, everybody may have to run to the used facilities before they got to get back to work at 1. I think we go for another hour here, easily. Thanks, Gary, and let's stay in touch. And everybody, thank you. And I hope you all do half of what Gary's done in your public careers.
Well, good to spend the hour with all you guys. Good luck with your summer jobs and your careers. I'm really delighted to see you all interested in government. And
you'll take, if someone wants to email you privately and ask for follow-up on Climate to Thrive, that would be okay?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, do you guys have my email? I mean, Climate to Thrive has a website, climatetothrive.org, but I don't know if you shared my email with people.
We probably didn't, just out of some concern for privacy.
Yeah, well, you're welcome to do that.
Okay. If anybody needs to get in touch with Gary, let me know. Thanks, everybody. Thank you. And I'll see you in our next series.
Right.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.